Hello. I want to talk a bit about the subject of dialogue and the importance of dialogue. Now, I say dialogue in the context of debate. Um, that's not to say that debate is a bad thing. I think balanced debate, healthy debate can be a very good thing. Even passionate debate can be a good thing. I also don't want people to think that the angle I'm taking with this is that people should always engage in super polite, very civilized, let's have a nice cup of tea sort of discussion. Certainly, there are some issues where people are rightly angered about, and they want to let their passion show, and they have to let their passion show. Um, I mean, I can definitely relate to that because I am, frankly, quite an opinionated person. I have strong views on a lot of subjects, and I make no pretense about that. Um, but actually, based on partly on recent experience, I do think dialogue can also be very, very important and can be strong. Without going into all the details, simply because it would be repetitive, I have recently been in situations where I have judged something, frankly, a little bit too hastily. And when I criticize someone for a certain position that they held because I believe that came from a certain position I disagreed with, that person responded in a civil way and we ended up talking. And it's not that I totally changed my mind, but I was a little bit, I did come out, I feel a bit more open minded because I had been too hasty in my initial judgment. So I feel quite good now because I've come out of that situation, knowing more about the situation and feeling that there's been some sort of understanding. There are still areas I disagree with, but I feel I've come out of the situation knowing more about it. The problem with debate and arguments, and I can actually see an inherent problem in public debate formats. Although they can certainly be good for democracy, I can also see a problem in. I mean, if we look at politics, politics is about power, that goes without saying. So, if politicians are in a public debate, it becomes about winning the debate. Now, because politicians make decisions that impact other lives, it is right that they're judged on their performance, and it is right that people get to formulate, an idea of how well it goes down, how it resonates with the public. And if we look at the history of this, going back to the 1960 US election, Kennedy versus Nixon, it's interesting how there was a different angle. People who listened on the radio thought Nixon won, people who watched it thought Kennedy won, and the election was very close. Here in Britain, in the first prime ministerial debate in 2010, Nick Clegg was widely seen to have won that. He ended up as deputy prime minister. So public debate can be a powerful thing. Of course, it can be. I mean, if we look at prime minister's questions, I'm just sticking to the sphere of politics for now. If we look at prime minister's questions, it's always about point scoring, and unfortunately, a lot of it is about personal jabs as opposed to just plain policy. When David Cameron became Prime Minister, he vowed to end the Punch and Judy style of Prime Minister's questions. Now, to be fair to Cameron, the opposition leaders um, had equal responsibility to rein in on that sort of culture. I think the thing about Prime Minister's questions is for a long time it's been seen as a bit of a circus. MPs believe that, the public believe that, prime ministers believe that. And on one hand, I think there is something to be said of the raucous nature. I think that can actually be a good thing for democracy because if it's too polite and too guarded, then raw discussion cannot be had. On the other hand, it becomes a little bit tiring if it is just about point scoring and just about low blows. To be fair to Jeremy Corbyn, and it's not often I say this, but because I do disagree with a lot of his politics, but to be fair to Jeremy Corbyn, he does try his best to rise above the petty personal attacks, and I give him credit for that. Um, Theresa May in her first PMQs, it was one of her, in my opinion, less honourable moments. She just got a little bit personal and just wanted to kind of get almost Thatcherite in her response. Since then, she's been a bit more prime ministerial, but I think it is very important because that resonates with the public how it comes across. Um, but if we look at any sort of exchange, it doesn't even have to be politics. It could be any sort of debate format. Now, arguments is another matter completely because that's why I hate trash like Big Brother. Because if you get two of the housemates, the reality TV show, if you get two of the housemates who get into an argument about something, chances are they would argue like that in real life. But because they know millions of people are watching, it becomes totally about point scoring, and that is totally crass because no one wants to feel they're losing an argument in front of millions of people. So it just becomes I mean, I think Big Brother's trash anyway. I don't have much time for it, but I think as a society we put too much emphasis on winning arguments as opposed to just listening to both sides and trying to understand someone's perspective. It becomes too much of an ego contest. So I'll give an example. If you have and this also comes into bias. If you have a biased crowd, of course they're going to applaud the person that they ideologically side with. That doesn't mean the other person has lost the argument. And I don't really like videos that say things like person A handed a new asshole. Um, person B is is put down. It's petty high school style nonsense. And I think it's a disgrace that big news networks actually tap into this sort of language. CNN and some of the other big networks, even the BBC is starting to do it. This very petty sort of almost like high school rubbish rather than acting like professional news networks. They shouldn't be encouraging that style of debate. Their job should be to report the debate. And okay, if someone has clearly been trounced in it, that's a different matter. But I just don't like some of the jargon that comes around it, like uh, this person is shut up or this person is put down. Well, from that point of view, shouting someone down doesn't win an argument. It might silence them because they physically cannot respond to a barrage like that. But I just see that as obnoxious, even borderline bullying, as opposed to winning an argument. I mean, I've seen episodes of not Question Time, but the show Free Speech that was around at the time of the last general election. Not sure if it's still being aired, but I remember there was one young guy got up and basically he criticised New Labour feminists. Well, instead of just disagreeing with his position, other people in the crowd decided to jeer at him. Now, adults, in my opinion, who boo or jeer need to grow the hell up. You don't win an argument by sitting, several rows back where a person cannot directly engage with you. That's frankly cowardly. If you disagree with something that someone is saying, put up your hand and say you disagree and then make your case. But just booing someone, I think it's pathetic behaviour. I've never had time for that, whoever the target is. Um, so the importance of dialogue is, for me, stepping back just a little bit and taking your ego out of it and thinking, well, maybe this person is saying something that I can relate to. Maybe they're saying something that I'm looking at something from a different angle. Now, if someone comes in with an attack on you, a very ad hominem personal attack, then fight fire with fire. I totally understand that. But if it's a simple case of having a different point of view about something, I think too often people get into mudslinging and get into personal attacks. Why can't we just, as a society, disagree with people without getting so personal. I mean, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I've certainly got into heated disputes. And there's been times I have put forward an argument in not the best of ways because I was angry and because, I was sharp worded. And likewise with whoever I was debating with. I'm not saying there's no place for this. Certainly, if someone makes an outrageous statement, then I'm not for a second advocating that people respond with a really overly civil response. If someone says something extremely inflammatory, they should be challenged robustly. But too often, that robust nature of response comes when the initial statement hasn't been that inflammatory, it's just been a different point of view. And this is difficult. I accept this is difficult because, especially if the subject is particularly emotive, if we're talking about crime or, really divisive issues like abortion or the death penalty or anything like that, people are going to have strong views. And it's very difficult to see. Let's just take the issue of abortion as an example. It would be nice just for once for a discussion that goes something like this. So, pro life advocate, oh, I don't hate women, I just believe that life should be respected from that stage. Pro choice advocate, well, I certainly don't believe in killing babies, but I believe women should be sovereign of their own bodies. And then the two people agree to disagree. But the chances are you're not going to see dialogue like that. You're going to see one person accusing the other of being a horrible woman hating bigot, and the other person might accuse the other person of being an extreme feminist baby killer. I mean, when you get down to that sort of rhetoric, and to be fair to President Obama, I do believe he always tried his best to bring civil dialogue to political exchanges most of the time. And this was amid sometimes very intense personal attacks. So that is one area I do give Obama some credit. Wherever you think of his politics, I actually would deem Obama's politics more left wing than my own. But I do believe that you could say anything about the man, but he always tried to have civil dialogue. I don't think anyone can accuse him of not doing that. Um, and like I say, given the personal attacks that he faced, that's quite admirable. But likewise, there are certain Republican people who I would argue are also very reasonable in the way they go about their dialogue. People might disagree with them, people might dislike them. But when someone is trying to be reasonable, I think it's important to try and just step ego back a little bit. I'm not saying, by the way, you have to end up agreeing with the person. You can come out of the discussion completely disagreeing, but at the very least, listen to what the person is saying and maybe try and give them the benefit of the doubt. It could be that you disagree with a position, but you appreciate that they're coming from good intentions. It could be that you disagree with their position, but you appreciate that they are trying to reach out. So I really think that this is quite important. This is not to say be overly sensitive. This is not to say there is no room for passionate debate. And like I say, if someone insults you or attacks you, you've every right to fight fire with fire. But dialogue is important. And as for the public, I think people need to stop putting so much emphasis on public figures winning or losing. And I'm not just talking about politicians, I'm talking about anyone. There's too much emphasis, and you see this all over YouTube, of like this person wins this debate and this person, and it's always biased. When you look at whoever has posted the video, it's always coming from the perspective of the person who is ideologically siding with the person they claim has won. Like I say, in general elections, it does matter because it resonates with the public. But in other occasions, it should just be about dialogue. So let me know your thoughts. Just to sum up, it isn't about saying people can't have passionate views. And I'm not even saying people need to come out in agreement or understanding everything. You could be in total disagreement, but at least sort of say, well, let's agree to disagree. And that's another thing. Sometimes there comes a point where debates just have to end. Again, it can be about ego. Both sides want to win. But sometimes it's just about, well, I've said my piece. I'm comfortable with what I've said. I've listened to the other person, and that's it. It's over. I'm not going to get them to see my point of view, and they're not going to get me to see their point of view. So sometimes when someone walks away, I don't agree that's defeat. Sometimes it's just because they don't see the point of it continuing. So what? I really don't think it's weakness for people to find common ground. That's why I like in presidential prime ministerial debates when one candidate actually says, "Well, I understand the President Obama's perspective. I understand Governor Romney's perspective. I agree with Gordon Brown on this. I can see David Cameron's point on that." That's not weakness. That's not selling out. And that's what one final point I'll make. In this country, I think we are far too critical of bipartisan work. Just because politicians work together doesn't mean they're selling out. That's nonsense. Do you really want a situation, my fellow Britons, where just because people in different parties are always arguing with each other? That's not I don't think that's an asset to democracy. The point of an opposition is to hold the government to account. It shouldn't be always disagreeing. If there's areas where an opposition can work with the government, they should. Say, for example, counterterrorism or other areas. But anyway, I'll leave it there. In my opinion, dialogue is very, very important. Um, Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.